Welcome to Science Fiction Snob. This is a segment where I talk about classic science fiction books. The object of this video is to provide a quick overview for newer science fiction readers who may not have been exposed to the glory of the golden age of science fiction. If you are trapped in the present science fiction hell of lifeless and unimaginative Star Wars, Star Trek, Halo books, etc., then this is for you. It goes without saying that I highly recommend these books. Today I'm going to overview the classic sci-fi series Dune, going over the first three books, Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. Try to give you the information you need to decide if this series is for you. Note that recently a new Dune movie just began filming and is set for release in November of 2020. It has a very high-profile cast and crew. See the other videos on my channel for more information on the upcoming Dune movie, as well as a re-release of the Dune board game and some Dune-related video game information. Frank Herbert's Dune consists of 6 books, the first 3 being Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune, which we are going to talk about. The second 3 books are God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House Dune. There are also a large number of books set in the Dune universe written by Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. I will go over these in future videos. A Nebula Award winner, Dune was first published in 1965 by author Frank Herbert. Set approximately 20,000 years from our present time, the known universe is populated solely by humans and governed by a feudal system where great houses rule planets and compete with each other through war, assassination, and intrigue. Dune is the story of House Atreides, ordered to leave their home planet of Caladan to occupy the planet Arrakis. They face intrigue from within and without. Dune is the only planet with a spice, an important drug that extends life, allows fast space travel, and expands consciousness. After taking over Dune, House Atreides is betrayed by their arch-rivals, the evil Harkonnens, killing the Duke Leto and forcing his son Paul to seek refuge in the desert with local Fremen. Paul organizes a revolution to overthrow the Emperor and take control of the known universe. Dune Messiah is the second book, first published in 1969. Taking place 12 years after Dune, Paul Atreides rules as Emperor, but cementing his rule has unleashed a jihad that has killed billions. Yet, his visions tell him that this is far from the worst outcome for humanity, as he tries to navigate a future that avoids stagnation and destruction. Meanwhile, the Bene Gesserit, Spacing Guild, and Talaxiu, along with some Fremen, conspire against the Atreides. Chiani, Paul's concubine, gives birth to preborn twins, but dies in childbirth. Paul is rendered blind in an attack, and as per Fremen tradition, walks out into the desert without a still suit to die, leaving his sister Alia to raise the twins as regent. Children of Dune was published in 1976. 9 years after Paul walked into the desert, Dune has begun its ecological transformation, and the Fremen old ways have begun to erode. This story follows the twins as they confront their sister as she deals with a mysterious figure called the Preacher, who has arisen to rail against Alia and the injustices of her government. The novel ends with Leto, too, having to make a terrible choice. As you can see, the synopses get a little less detailed as we go. I don't want to spoil the novels for you, and I figure if you're reading Children of Dune, you're pretty much already hooked. Again, I highly recommend this series. Frank Herbert is one of the great science fiction writers of the 20th century. You can't call yourself a science fiction fan or snob if you have not read Dune. So that completes my synopsis of the books. Let's talk a little bit about why these books are so good and why you should read them. The world building in Dune is just incredible. There is no author that puts in as much detail as Frank Herbert does into his world building. The amount of detail is just incredible. There is, I'm going to talk about this in another video, but there is talk that a lot of the books that came after Herbert died, written by his son and Kevin J. Anderson, they were based on detailed notes that he made about the world, and they put those into book form. So, what you see in the book, there is tons more to the background of the book that is in there. That's how detailed he was. Now, you can, when you're reading the books, you'll notice that there's many themes that go through. There's a lot, the ecology, the man in the natural world theme. All that is seen through the sand, and how the Fremen, um, how they interact with the world of Dune and their desire to change that. Fate and free will, another theme. Paul Atreides, his fate, that's constantly up, especially through the first three books. What is his fate, and how much does he have free will for to his fate, and is he trapped into it? And I mean, that's part of it's really the major themes of one of the major themes of the second and third book is, is he stuck to his fate? Customs and traditions, there's a lot of that go on. The world is, it's a feudal society, and people are very, traditional, and there's certain customs that they follow all the time. Coming of age, the growing up of Paul, power, and the use of power, very big theme throughout it, throughout the books. A big one, another good one, is religion. When Dune was written, science fiction authors tend to be, anti-religion, pro-science. They see as a religion as some sort of throwback, and they often don't talk about that very much. Herbert embraced religion, and he took it to another level, and really examined it through the Bene Gesserit, especially, and through some of the Fremen and some of their their traditions, customs, and their religious beliefs. There's a lot of that throughout the book. Very interesting stuff. Frank Herbert, the whole Dune is a mishmash of different religions. He took his interest in Zen, Sunnism, and Buddhism, put them together with some Catholic religions to come up with this sort of weird amalgamation of what religion might be like 20,000 years ago from now, as well as the Fremen have their own religion, and the use, the Bene Gesserit, how they use religion to control people. Very, very interesting themes. It's not something that anybody did before him. What else? Other themes. Politics. There's a lot of politics within the universe, as you would expect in a feudal society with all these great houses. Backstabbing, the plan between the Emperor and the House Harkonnen, and the use of the Atreides. That's all good stuff there. Not as interesting as I didn't find that as interesting as the religion, but it's it's a big piece of it. Fear is another great one, and the talk about fear, and fear being the mind killer. And I don't want to, if you haven't read it, I don't want to go into it too much to ruin it from you. But fear, another big theme throughout the books, and facing your fears, and a lot of that comes through humans. I wouldn't say it's superhuman, but if you haven't read the books, there's not much in the way of 20,000 years from now we would think the machines would be running everything, but Frank Herbert took care of that, and humans are supreme in the Dune universe because of the Butlerian Jihad, which was a war against thinking machines. So there are no thinking machines, so humans had to rise to a certain level, and there are certain ways that we rise to be able to do the things that would be required in a highly technologically advanced society. An example of them, a good example is the Mentats, which are human computers. If you haven't read the book, you won't know about that, but that's a very interesting aspect of it, how he took and said, all right, well, how can we raise humans up? And it's a very interesting theory, and I think it's probably one of the most interesting things I find about his books, and how humans could be supplanted. And here's an idea of how we wouldn't be supplanted, but we would still have to improve ourselves. At least some of us would, in order to take on some of these aspects that would be required from a highly advanced spacefaring society. So that's very interesting themes. Allow a little bit negative about the books. Some people find them to be a little dense and hard to read. I don't find that at all. I was, for me, they were difficult to put down. I constantly, I started reading them and I had to finish them. Herbert does he does the trick where each chapter, he's got a couple different storylines going on, so each chapter will jump from a different storyline. So I think that can help with a book that's very dense, but it can also be a little distracting sometimes, where you're going along and you're following this storyline for a chapter, and you're like, I want to find out what happens next, but then the next chapter and the next couple chapters are going to look at other things. So then you go to the next chapter, you're like, oh, it's back to this storyline. You got to kind of go, oh, remember what happened to whatever, what was happening, what's going to happen now, and you get involved in it. Just as you get involved, the chapter ends, and then you go off to another one. So I find, I see why they do that, why he uses that technique, but I find it sometimes a little bit distracting, and sometimes I like to go through a whole storyline, but understanding that it's done that way because all these things are going on pretty much simultaneously. He needs them to fit together in a certain way. Okay, so anyway, that's my quick synopsis of the books and some of the themes that go. I really hope that the themes will really pique your interest and make you want to try out the book. Try out Dune. If you don't like it, dump it. But I think it'd be very hard. I think the vast majority of anyone who sees this video, you're going to read the first book and you're going to want to know what happens further on. And I will tell you, Herbert's 6 books, they span, from the beginning to the end, another, 6,000 years or so. So you're going to see what happens. You're going to, after you read the first 3 books, you'll wonder, okay, well, what's going to happen? You will find out what happens. You'll see to the end. And then, there's even more when we talk about the Brian Herbert and the Kevin J. Anderson books, but I don't want to spoil that for you. All right, so I hope that gives you enough that you'll go out there and give Dune a try. It's very much worth it. And, if you want to comment, tell us what you think of the book, discuss it. I read all the comments. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And I'll talk to you in the next video.